Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
Number 246 in Sounding the Shallows.
246, yes, and still nowhere near shore. Nowhere near shore at all. In fact, I know for a lot of people this week is causing fear and trembling all over the place. And maybe for that reason, Adrian, I don't know whether I was relieved or just caught up in something that took me right away from that news. And it was a book. It was a book called An Anthology of Intriguing Animals.
Oh, right.
It just was a wonderful, wonderful book. It was bought by one of our sons for our 4-year-old grandson. But actually,
that one, yeah.
It's
Wonderful
filled
book.
me with total wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he was as intrigued by the dung beetle, to be honest, as any of the other
What
exotic
did we learn
creatures.
about the dung beetle?
Well, as far as he was concerned, did you know, Grandad, that the dung beetle pushes a great ball of poo around? And then he laughed a lot.
I did vaguely know that, but I don't wish to really
The one
see it happen.
when you looked through the book, this is one of the ones that
Well, I
intrigued you.
recognise this word because it's every now and then used in cryptic crosswords, and it's the word axolotl. But interesting fact about that is that the newborn ones are called axolotls.
They are really not.
No, they're not.
But never mind.
It's an axolotl, and it's a sea creature.
Well, it is. It's an amphibian.
Yeah.
It starts life in water, and is a bit like a tadpole, but it never becomes a frog. I mean, it stays an axolotl, and it just gets a bit bigger. It's so lovely. If you ever get a chance to look at a picture of an axolotl, you'll see that.
I am looking at one now.
But you'll see that sometimes in the wild they might be a bit boring and grey and green, but actually this one we're looking at is a sort of pinky yellow colour with extraordinary pink frilly bits sticking out of it.
It looks like something out of a Disney film, doesn't it?
It does. And the pink frilly bits are not, I mean, it almost looks like one of those feather boas, pink ones, but actually they are its gills, and that's how it breathes.
So they're quite small, aren't they?
Yeah, they're only little.
Yeah, grey, green or black.
But they have...
some are pale
yeah,
pink.
That's what I was saying, the ones in the wild. But they have a superpower.
What is that?
Well, their superpower, and it is a pretty big superpower actually, apparently they can grow new body parts. They can replace a leg, an eye, a lung, a tail, or a part of the heart.
Well, they're way ahead of the NHS, aren't they?
That's a superpower.
Yeah.
And I know that science and evolution and all the rest of it, I know they've claimed all the knowledge of all the animals. But it took me right back. I mean, this is not to do with whether or not the Garden of Eden was the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve were Adam and Eve, but it was just how extraordinary, especially some of the smaller animals are in our world. And another one that I loved, and if you ever got the chance to find out about this one, it's called a sea dragon, and it's a fish. But it's a leafy sea dragon, and it looks like seaweed.
It looks like a randomly assembled children's toy, doesn't it?
It does. And it has flaps of skin that make wavy branches, and so it can drift around like seaweed. So a predator who can actually swim straight past it and not recognise it. I mean, how clever is that?
Amazing. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it.
And the other fact about them, which again he passed on to you, was that it's not the mummy who looks after the eggs after the mummy has had all the eggs.
Oh,
it's the daddy.
Yeah.
And did you know, Grandad, that the daddy has sticky stuff all along, all underneath his tail?
Yeah.
And the eggs, 200 eggs, stick on his tail, and he swims around with them until they hatch.
That's right, yeah. And he's disguised, sort of, isn't he?
Yeah, well, he's completely disguised.
Are hidden.
So the eggs are hidden. There he is, wafting around.
Survive. Yeah, well.
I think it's important at the moment to kind of think of moments and things that have been extraordinary and special, don't you? Just to balance the nightmares that we're living in.
I must say, there are times at the moment when I do sink a bit. I don't like it, but I was thinking. I mean, I didn't know what you were going to mention that, but I was thinking today about. Well, it started by remembering that in the program on Radio 4 on Saturday morning, there used to be a section. I think when Richard Coles was on it, maybe after that, but there was a section where people thanked other people. They recorded people who obviously rung in and said they got a story to tell.
They were moments often, they were often moments being helped by a stranger, weren't they?
That's right,
actually?
and they never saw them again, and just wanted to say how much they appreciated the help they got. And as soon as I started thinking about that, I thought, as I often do, I mean, I think when you write full time, there's a little man in your head with a notebook and a pen. And if you think of a sort of heading, immediately that little person starts making lists. And I was trying to think of times when we've experienced that, or one of us has experienced it, and all sorts of things came to mind.
Well, come on, let's have one of them.
Well, one of them, which is particularly related to what we've done for years, and I've done for even more years, was when you're travelling and you're speaking. And in the old days, when I used to go on my own more, or much more, you'd sometimes stay with people. We don't try not to do that so much now because it can be quite tiring after doing a whole evening. Anyway, one evening I went back to the house where I was staying, and someone very quietly gestured me into a room and to a table where there was a chair, and I sat on the chair because obviously that was what I'm suggesting I do. Next to the mat on the table by my place was a bottle of red wine with the top off. There was cutlery there. There were salt and pepper there. Everything was ready for one person to have a meal, and then whoever it was disappeared, and somebody else appeared and brought a most beautiful roast dinner with all the vegetables and stuff. And then they left, and the door closed. And some people will know what I mean by this, that as I heard the door closing and the silence fell, it was the loudest sentence in the world. It was someone saying, with delight probably and understanding, you just enjoy your meal, have a glass of wine, and take it easy. And I've never forgotten that. It was just a lovely surprise.
Yes, it's one of those moments where if you were able to, you would say thank you to him. I mean, you've had lovely conversations and late night chats with people you've stayed with, haven't you? But I remember on that occasion you've been doing quite a lot of speaking, and your voice was tired, you were tired, and it was somebody who just understood that on that one particular evening, the perfect hospitality was no hospitality.
Well, that's right. It is a problem. For those who don't know, it is a problem, especially if you've been trying to project yourself as a sort of humorous person with a light-hearted view of what other things people think is serious. And then when you get back to a house, you turn into a miserable sort of basilisk-type character.
Well, maybe that person understood that characteristic.
They did. No. I think they understood the tension of it.
Yeah, I mean, you can have the opposite of that. And I was thinking of somebody we met, Adrian, who was talking about one evening. And she was gay, and the church had accepted that she was, and they were nice to her. But she always had that feeling that they were being particularly nice, in inverted commas, that they didn't really understand or quite accept, but they decided to be nice. And she went round for a meal one evening, knowing there were going to be quite a lot of other people there. And part of her was thinking, it's going to happen again. They're all going to be smiling extra smilingly at me in order to show that they
tolerate.
A little more than that, but that they were going to make an effort.
Yes.
And when she got there, the host said, I really hope you don't mind, but the only chair left is the one near me, and it's the wonky chair that nobody wants to sit on. And she was so pleased. She sat on the wonky chair right in the middle of the hubbub of the evening, no longer being treated as this extra strange extra person.
Yeah.
And she never forgot it, that moment when she was taken right into the very centre of things. There's so many ways that people can be extraordinary. They may not grow new body parts like the axolotl, but they can suddenly get it and transform a situation.
Yeah, it's one of the lines I always remember from Three Men in a Boat, which is one of my favourite ever books, a sort of Bible of observational humour and kindness. There's a bit in the boat where one of them's talking about being out on in the boat. Well, it may have been then. They're talking about being out on a river somewhere, and there was a woman who had thrown herself into the water and drowned, and they knew that she had had a child outside marriage, which nowadays would be, wouldn't be anything really, but at that time would be regarded as something terribly dark and dreadful and sinful and all that. And the Jerome who wrote it, the line he wrote was something like, she'd sinned, some of us do that, And at that time, that was such a good thing to write for those who were doing things that society
lets people
believe.
in.
Yeah,
like the person who came in and sat on the wonky chair. Lets people in.
Yeah.
And not sort of keeps them neatly on the edge as an issue or a situation. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've had some moments, and I really hope anybody listening to this will be thinking of one or two that maybe they've had, because we'd love to hear about them. But we have had some unusual moments, haven't we? And one of them, I mean, this might sound rather more mundane, but we were on our honeymoon, weren't we?
Well, we were on a honeymoon, that's true.
Yes. And that immediately conjures up pictures, I know, of exotic beaches and beautiful places and posh hotels. But actually, we'd hitchhiked on our honeymoon with a tent.
To Cornwall.
Yeah.
And
we were there for almost 2 weeks. And the first week had been idyllic, hadn't it? The sun had shone, but the second week it had rained solidly and relentlessly. And we'd run out of money, and our tent was soaked. Even the toilet roll that we hung on the piece of string was soaked. Everything was soaked. Our socks were soaked. And actually, we were thoroughly miserable, weren't we?
Yep, we were. But earlier that day, in the middle of rain, absolutely sheeting down.
In St. Ives,
yeah. I suddenly saw through the rain somebody who looked exactly like a friend of ours, his name was Murray, who was married to Vivian. And I thought, I can't be him. And I just sort of thought,
supposed to be back home in Sussex.
So later that day, we actually ran into them, and it was them. And we had no money and nothing.
And very wet.
And they paid for us to stay somewhere very warm and comfortable. I'll never forget that. Yeah.
No, it was the most amazing thing. They didn't demand anything of us. They gave us a room. And I remember we put our soaking wet socks on the radiators and our clothes, which steamed. And we lay there in bed thinking, we're warm and we're dry and we're okay. It was just the most lovely thing to happen. Yes, it was. And then we hitched home the next day, which I think took about 3 years, but anyway.
A story we always enjoyed, if you remember, was of the two ladies we met at the Abbey, I think it was. What was their
that was really interesting, because we saw them and we knew there was something unusual going on, didn't we? Because they were kind of laughing and crying. They were obviously knew each other really well, and we finally found out what had happened. And one of the ladies, her husband had died from motor neuron, and it had been one of those horrible, miserable, ghastly downward slopes that motor neuron takes you on. But it had been made worse for this woman and her family by some very well-meaning Christian friends who had heard about a big meeting going on in a local town where there was somebody who apparently had a healing ministry, a Christian. Now, there was nothing wrong in them wanting the very best for this man. They took him along, and they took him up, if you remember. And, well, it was horrid, wasn't it? Because the person who, I think there was a little group of people praying, and they lifted him out of his wheelchair and told him that if he had the faith, he could stand. And they dropped him onto the ground, and he tore his trousers. And when he came back, he was brought back by these very distraught friends.
Failure and humiliation.
Yes, and I mean, the friends were devastated by what had happened. I mean, they hadn't meant any harm. But as far as she was concerned, that was it. There wasn't going to be any real contact with anybody to do with the church. And she sort of huddled away with her husband and little boy. And then one day, there was a knock on the door. And it was a woman standing there who said, I've been told to come...
She knew them a little, didn't she?
She knew them a little bit. But this person said, I've been told to come and look out, be part of you. I can't remember the exact words now, Adrian, but she came and she was a complete support to this family and to the man who
said,
finally
I'm going
died.
to be with you until
Yes,
the end.
she did, until the end. And then after he died, the woman's little boy said, wasn't it amazing, Mummy, when, and I'm not going to say her name, came to be Jesus for us. No wonder they were laughing and crying. No wonder they were held in something that had, again, an extraordinary thing had happened. For all of them. For both of the women, for the little boy, and obviously for the man who was to die. I don't know. I looked today, Adrian, I was coming out of Lidl actually, and I noticed this huge amount given in the in the stand for groceries to be given for the local community. At the cafe, the church cafe, where I just do one day a week, the amount of stuff given, the generosity, they are superpowers, really. They're people digging into themselves and wanting to do something.
I think a lot of people do like doing that, don't they?
Do.
I don't know
really
if they're superpowers, but it's just discovering that within yourself. Some of it is imagination, isn't it? People who can imagine what it is to be without and can imagine
I suppose
how tough it is to live.
I suppose what I meant, Adrian, is that human nature, and we're always rambling on about human nature as though it's a sort of separate thing to everything, but it actually is full of the possibilities of doing something life-changing.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, really.
I think it's quite exciting, really, myself. I mean, I like the I don't know if it's a challenge or the opportunity to be of some use. There was a very famous speaker, writer bloke who talked about God using you like small change.
Well, we know that was John Wimber. We've talked about him before.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just going to make the point away from the name that it's a very healthy way to look at something that is often becomes grandiose and overwordy and ends up not meaning anything.
Yes, I absolutely. And I also think that just at the moment, it's really good, just going back to this book, Adrian, where I started, but I think it's really important to allow ourselves, I got wildly excited because we've got one daffodil come out. I mean, spring is slow. It doesn't seem to understand it's supposed to be starting tomorrow or whenever it is. It's not done a lot in our garden. But let's look for moments of wonder, because it's all pretty ghastly out there at the moment. So let's try and think of moments where maybe something really lovely happened unexpectedly.
Yeah. There are certainly, as we hear from a lot of people around who've gone through really, really dark and terrible things, and
but often they've found that they can still laugh and they can still
the muscle of laughter remains, thank God, and also sort of something about self-deprecation and flexibility in thinking. As soon as you chain yourself to a narrow way or the wrong sort of narrow way, things can go terribly wrong, because there's an immediate requirement for breadth when you encounter people who have a real need.
What do you mean then?
Well, there is no rule. There are no rules. There's nothing that says when someone is sad, when it is you do this or this. You may have learned from experience, but you never know quite what is required. I mean, you'll remember, and I remember someone rushing into the place where we worked then and saying, "My husband's going to be here in 2 minutes. He's got a terminal illness and he doesn't want to be here." And she said it. She's so lovely, but she said it very quickly because she needed to communicate this tension. And it was
I don't think they've had a great car journey there.
No, it was the best thing she could have done, because for me, all I need is a heads up of that sort. And I don't know what happens, but some kind of I don't know what it is. I think as soon as you meet, or I remember in that case, as soon as I met that person, my way of being with him had changed. It's odd. I can't even describe how that works. I must say, I was remembering rather more selfishly.
I thought we'd already talked about your roast dinner and your bottle of wine.
I was remembering when we had a burglary and someone wonderfully, again, we mentioned it in a meeting. I think perhaps we should do that more. No, we mentioned that the laptop had been stolen, and among other things. And someone, I think it was the vicar, very quietly handed us a cheque for whatever it was to replace that.
Yeah.
And those quiet things are so powerful.
Yeah,
they
are.
Lovely.
And I mean, the generosity that we see with the food bank, so often it's people very quietly coming in laden with great carrier bags of things, not because they want a big thank you, but because it's been on their hearts.
Yeah, that's right.
Human nature, I'm sure, an essential part of it for all of us, for Christians and all people, certainly not just, but is to actually be kind and generous. It just all gets a bit twisted and it's a bit difficult at the moment to believe in that.
Yeah, well, I believe in it. I believe in kindness.
And I think a lot of people do. So it'd be great to hear from you, and we can have some thank yous to people who've helped you.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it really would.
Tell us who you would like to thank, and we'll see you
speak
next
to you
time.
next week.